It sounds very bad. How serious is it, and how worried should we as users be?
It's very difficult to know at this point without having examined the data set. That hasn't been made public, of course, and I think that we'll probably learn a lot more in the course of the next few days as more details are revealed. But it's certainly on a much larger scale than previous breaches that we've seen.
Well, it's a little scary. You know, we know major websites were affected, but we're not going to tell you which websites. Why not? You know, how do I know if I need to be worried?
And that's one of the really interesting questions, because you look at some of the previous breaches, and they've typically affected a small number of websites or a single website. So in the case of the eBay breach, where you had 145 million credentials that were leaked, what does the distribution look like in this particular case? Is it one company that accounts for the vast majority of the credentials, or is it a very large number of companies? We don't know yet.
Are there, you know, in the case of eBay, which you cited, I'm glad you did, they had enormous expenses in the last quarter because of this breach and what they had to do to fight this. Are there specific companies that are going to know what was happening and have to face those similar costs in the current period, in the current quarter, where they're going to have to suddenly start spending a lot more to fix the problem because they know they've got it, even if we don't know they've got it?
Well, certainly if they've discovered that they're affected by this breach, then they're going to have significant costs to figure out what went wrong and what they can do about it. But one of the really scary things about it is that there may not be anything that they can do about it depending on the method of attack which is used to be able to create the breach. So some of the details that Hold Security have released so far indicate that the hacking group started off by just purchasing credentials online from other hacking groups through the black market, but then they switched to using botnet-based attacks. So when you use a botnet-based attack, what you can do is leverage the previous credentials you've stolen to be able to go right through the front door of other websites to be able to test those credentials and discover which ones are valid on other websites.
Wait, so let me paraphrase. So in other words, they learn an individual's username and password, then they blast the same username and password across the internet to find other places where that user has used the same thing, and the company doesn't ever know that they've actually got the exposure.
Exactly, and that's not something that constitutes a typical security breach on the company's part, because they don't have any vulnerability in their infrastructure that the attackers are exploiting. They're just going right through the login form.
So how do the companies know?
Well, they can find evidence of those usernames and passwords being used. So in the case of this particular attack, one of the things that they found was that the initial use cases have been to be able to send spam and malicious email links. So the companies that have users that are breached, they may discover these spam links or malicious email links going out.
Now, they report, they're saying, is a Russian gang, essentially. Who are these people? What are they doing with this information? Are they selling this information? Is that the end game?
Well, it's a very sophisticated ecosystem when it comes to dealing in credentials. So there are many different things that they can do. It looks like so far they're monetizing it by providing services like sending out these malicious links. In some cases, what they can do is they can use the botnets that they have built in order to be able to create even more sophisticated attacks. Attacks like man in the browser, which can be used to take those credentials and then steal money from people's bank accounts. But the level of monetization that they can actually accomplish is based on the specific type of attack that they're selling to the rest of the black market.
What are I imagine this affects so many different businesses that would, 10 years ago, the companies that would have faced this kind of thing had nascent businesses online, but as more and more companies turn to sort of being online, being mobile even. I wonder what the company's risks are and how they mediate that through insurance or whatever else.
Well, it certainly requires a great deal of sophistication and vigilance in order to be able to maintain a complicated online presence. And companies are trying to reach their users as broadly as possible wherever they might be. So having an online presence is pretty much essential to just about every business these days.
Target just released the cost of that massive data breach. $148 million, though they have $38 million of insurance. You know, we keep asking this question, can these attacks really be stopped? You know, can security really get so good that this doesn't happen, or will the hackers just catch up every time?
Well, I don't think that you can ever make a system that is absolutely unhackable from a theoretical standpoint, but what you can do is create very practical defenses that make certain types of attacks so expensive that the hackers end up deciding to do something else.
What are those practical defenses?
Well, this is actually one of the things that Shape Security is focused on, being able to introduce barriers between different websites in order to prevent automation from from occurring. So this gang is estimated to be about 20 people in size, and yet they've stolen over 1 billion credentials. The only way to do that is through automation. If you can prevent those automated tools, the vulnerability scanners that they're using to be able to discover the exploits in the first place, as well as all the tools that they use to then monetize them, then it becomes much costlier for them to be able to create a business out of these types of attacks.
So sort of putting up walls between websites?
Yeah, like what? Like, I mean, quick example.
Well, our product is called the bot wall, and what it does is it prevents any type of automated attack from being able to go onto your website. So in this particular case, when they're trying to use the credentials and log into other websites to discover whether or not they work, they're actually unable to use a script to automatically log in. So if you've got millions of credentials, you can't manually test those and try and log into each one of them manually. You have to use some type of script using a botnet in order to be able to reach that scale. If the automation doesn't work, the attack goes away and the business model fails.